Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Traveling Bible Study as well as Tandem Bible Study for those of you that join us on YouTube. Today is Class 7 in our series on Unfulfilled Bible Prophecies, Class number 7. Again, a few housekeeping things, and then we'll have a word of prayer and then get into the lesson. Reminder that we have the Google Drive that has all of the documents in it by the class, today being Class 7. Today we're going to cover the Gog Magog component of our lesson, as well as we'll cover Damascus, which is our independent action number 3. I want to refer you to a few documents that we're going to use that we've been using. One, of course, is our Bible reference, right? This is a very important document. It takes you through and provides for you all of the Bible references that are associated with this unfulfilled prophecy. And again, we're on page 3 of the most current document, which is independent item number 2. We're still working, of course, from our summary document, our overview and summary document, if you'll remember. Okay, so we're on to that as well. We also have 3 handouts for today, 2 associated with Gog Magog. One is Understanding the Battle of Gog and Magog. Very good article. Recommend it. And then the on Gog Magog, last handout, is this wonderful article on timing, right? So we'll talk about that. And then we'll wrap up the day with an article on Damascus, all right? So let's start with a word of prayer, and then we will jump right in. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit that you've given us. Help us, Father, to be attentive to this lesson, to hear the things that you want us to know, and utilize it for the benefit of your kingdom. We ask this in your name. Amen. I've listed this in the outline as independent event, time event number 2. Sorry. And the reason I've listed it as independent item number 2, again, is if we don't know the exact timing of when it may occur. However, what we do know there's a few things we do know about the timing. And so we get into the timing piece. I'll give you some things that we absolutely know, and then we'll also address what some of the common or popular, if you will, beliefs are about the timing of when this may occur. However, for clarity, to be dogmatic, the Bible does not specifically tell us when this event will occur. That's why it's in our independent list of items for unfulfilled prophecies. So let's go on with Gog and Magog. Interesting thing about Gog and Magog. Let's explain the weird names to start with. The Bible tells us that Gog, G-O-G, is the head of the country of Magog, M-A-G-O-G. And Ezekiel wrote about this 2,600 years ago. And what this is a war or a battle by a coalition of countries that come against Israel in the latter days, right? So we know this is not an early on battle that happened 1,000 years ago. This is something that was provided from God to Ezekiel the prophet, and he wrote about it in chapters 38 and 39 of Ezekiel. So 2,600 years ago, he outlined what was going to happen. There is, sorry guys, there is in the Bible a second Gog and Magog war, which can sometimes be a little bit confusing. It comes at the end of the 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ. So there's two Gog and Magog, if you will, battles, and they are at least 1,007 years apart from one another. Maybe longer. I guess there's a possibility it might be a little shorter by, a few years, but at least 1,000 years apart from one another. Okay. Revelation 20 has 4 verses that talk about the Gog and Magog second war. Different war, different place, different time. Everything's different about it. It can be confusing because they're named the same. Do we know why they're named the same? We don't. Have people provided a thought or a theory? Yes. Some think that survivors of the first Gog and Magog war later become the sort of ringleaders that create the last minute rebellion with Satan that happens at the end of the 1,000-year millennium. Do we know that? We don't. So the second Gog Magog war consumes 4 verses of the Bible. It's pretty short. Whereas the war we're going to talk about today from Ezekiel actually covers 52 verses with a lot of detail. So let's dig into it so that we understand what this is about. And you might say, well, Tony, why are we going into so much detail? Well, first off, it is a pretty major prophetic event, which has yet to be fulfilled and was talked about by Ezekiel 2,600 years ago. The second reason that it's probably foremost or requires some real attention today is it's in the news. I mean, it's every day, every week. There's some piece of news that relates us to this upcoming battle. So from a prophetic standpoint, while we can sit here and have it in our class about an unfulfilled prophecy, guess what? It's unfolding right in front of us. And if you're sort of in my demographic or maybe even a little older or younger, you've seen the signs of this taking place for some time. So, what exactly is it? What it is a coalition of nations that come together. They come from the north to attack Israel with overwhelming forces. The Bible can be a little bit challenging to help you identify the names of these countries because, of course, we're familiar with today's names, country names, but they, of course, were dealing with the names of the countries or the regions back in Ezekiel's day. So, thankfully, there's been a lot of research from different folks that show us where all these people are from, what were the old country names. One of them is going to sound really apparent. You'll know it. And so with all of that sort of translation, and if you want to look at, remember our listing of the Bible verses, on independent number 2, you can see that I've listed the areas and where they are so that you've got a cheat sheet of where we're talking about. So what Ezekiel talks about is Gog, the head of Magog, and the Magog region, which is directly north of Israel, is Russia, modern day Russia. And so the leader of Russia, the Bible says God will put a hook in his jaw and draw him down, give him some big reason to want to come down against Israel. Do we know what that reason is? Broadly, yes. Narrowly, no. But we'll give some thoughts on it, okay? So, Gog, the head of Russia. Oh, you mean Putin? Well, we have to be careful. Yes, Putin is currently the head of Russia, but will he be the head of Russia this um, when this prophecy is fulfilled? We don't know. We don't know. So I'm not going to say Putin. Okay, I'm going to say the head of Russia, whatever that means in Ezekiel's uh, vision and prophecy given to him by God. So Russia teams up with Turkey, Iran, Sudan, which is Ethiopia, and Libya. And there might be some other bit players in there, Somalia, there's others that might be part of that. But the primary principled folks are Russia, Iran, Turkey, then Sudan and Libya. And they come together with great armies and a lot of horses with the idea of attacking Israel in an overwhelming way. And they're coming down from the north. What we have is what motivates them is they tell the surrounding countries that they're going after Israel for bounty or booty or something of value. Do we know exactly what that is? No. Can we speculate? Sure, and I'll give you some guesses here in a bit. What ends up happening and is apparent in this attack from what Ezekiel outlines is that Israel's all alone. What? Israel's all alone? Yeah, they're all alone. There's no USS Gerald Ford sitting off their coast. There's no U.S. fighter jets flying in. There's nothing. There are some surrounding nations, which we list on there, that protest, say, whoa, what are you guys doing? Don't be attacking Israel. Don't do that. Which is like Saudi Arabia and some European nations. And so what's going on is Israel's about to be attacked with overwhelming forces. Nobody comes to their aid. So that means, so there's some inferences that we're going to get into in a little bit from this. So where's the United States? Where's their ally during this attack? We'll have some thoughts there. Okay? So they're about ready to attack with overwhelming odds. And the God of Israel, remember we've talked about who that is, right? Jehovah. He steps in and he destroys 5/6, right? 5/6 of all the armies that have come after to attack Israel. And he does it with devastating earthquakes, flooding, hailstones, fire, brimstone, and he turns those armies against each other, so they're fighting each other. And what happens is it's a slaughter. Now, this isn't the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force jumped in and they did no. Well, this is the United States came. Nope. God. God purposely created a situation where there was no one to support Israel. There was no way they were going to win against these overwhelming forces. And guess what? God intervenes. So God intervenes and he destroys 5/6 of these armies. He then goes on to create judgment against the countries, the homelands that sent these armies. He's not very specific about what he does or how extent it is in the Bible, but he's going to extract some level of judgment against Russia, Turkey, Iran in their home countries. Not just their armies, their home countries. So, why would God do this? Well, it's interesting because he says, He says, I'm doing this for two reasons. Number one, to make my holy name known in the midst of my people Israel. So he's waking up the people of Israel, right? Because remember, right now, the Israelis have partial blindness. They're not thinking about God for the most part. They crucified Jesus Christ. He wasn't the Messiah to them. They're still looking for the Messiah, right? And so, and they're about ready to have the largest gay pride, whatever thing in Tel Aviv in the world, blah, blah, blah. Where is Israel in their relationship with God? It's in the toilet. But God said, I will bring you back and I will bring myself up to you. We will have our moment. Well, this is the start of that moment, right? God swoops in and supernaturally protects Israel in order to make, number one, his point to Israel. Number two reasons. He said, the nations shall know that I am the Lord and the Holy One of Israel. You know, if you think back to some of the stories from Daniel and Ezekiel, but primarily Daniel, when Daniel would defy Nebuchadnezzar, different punishments would come his way. You know, he thrown into the lion's den, thrown into the fire pit. I mean, you know, all these different things. And every time Daniel survived, Nebuchadnezzar would come to his senses and go, you know what? Daniel's God is the God. It's not Baal. It's not, you know. And so there were times in this whole relationship with Daniel that Nebuchadnezzar came to his own understanding about who is God. Now imagine if you're a Muslim, you've got your Allah, your Islam, you know, your own thing, and you know, hey, we're going to destroy the Jews, the little Satan, you know, all this rhetoric crap, and so you come after Israel. Now, who are these nations? Okay, let's understand who they are. Well, Russia. Well, I don't know if you know this, but 25% of Russia is Muslim. They've had the same issue of infiltration as Europe has in other places. It's just not as well publicized or known. My point is 25% of Russia, which was traditionally an Orthodox Christian faith, has been taken over by Muslims, Islam. Turkey, 100% Muslim. Iran, Muslim. Sudan, Muslim. Libya, Muslim. So guess what? So here you are, you've got your Muslim, Islam, Allah's the big kahuna, and you send the largest Islamic armies in the world to go crush little Israel, right? And 5/6 of your army gets slaughtered, and your home country will go through its own judgment. God said. Well, for those that survive that, what do you suppose their view is of Jehovah now, right? Yeshua, God, to Allah. I don't know. But if they acted like anything like Nebuchadnezzar, they're going to have a aha moment about whose God is really God. Do you get what I'm saying? Does the Bible tell us this? No. I'm making a step for you in the thinking, okay? So this is going to have a huge impact in the world, okay? We're going to talk about impacts here in just a little bit. So the big battle is about ready to happen. God just obliterates them right on the mountains of Israel, and it says that God then called upon all kinds of animals to come feast on the bodies and the horses of these invaders. Eat them down to the bone. Then God said, it will take Israel 7 months to bury all the intruders that died in this war. Can you believe that? 7 months. To take it one step further, and this is an interesting point, so just hang on to it and I'll make the connection here hopefully in a little bit. God also said that the enemy's weapons will be used by Israel to generate warmth, power, energy for 7 years. That Israel will not have a need for other energy sources, traditional energy sources, for 7 years because they're going to burn up and utilize the weaponry that was left behind. Wow, that just seems amazing, right? 7 years? Okay. So I want you to keep that peg of 7 years in your mind because it'll play together here in just a little bit. So 7 months to clear all the bones and bury everybody, and that's after the animals have feasted. 7 years to burn and utilize up all the weapons. Okay. So one of the things that I want to point out, and for those of you that are astute in your reading of Ezekiel, there's something I want to point out that was something that I actually recently learned. So bear with me for a moment on this issue. I use the New King James Version. That's the Bible that I prefer to use. I have an NIV, I have an ESV, I got all these different Bibles. But over the years, I've really gravitated toward the New King James because there are parts of the NIV or the ESV that I didn't think were really translated as well. Okay, curious point. All those other translations, including the New King James Version, shows in the first two verses of chapter 39 of Ezekiel the destruction of the armies. Okay? It is only in the original King James Version that God says, "And I will turn thee back and leave but 1/6 of thee, and will cause thee to come up from the north parts." So it is only in the original King James Version that the that it translates that only 5/6 of the armies are destroyed, and that 1/6 is not. Now, is this a minor deal? Is this a major deal? Well, again, this kind of all goes to that point of, does it impact salvation? No, it doesn't impact salvation. So I wouldn't throw it in the big deal category, but I think it's definitely worthy of some understanding and awareness. And I guess I feel bad that it wasn't translated over into the other versions. Is it a big deal? Well, maybe if that thing that I said earlier, which again is total supposition by another by other scholars, is that the remnant that doesn't get destroyed is part of the catalyst later after the millennium to have the second Gog and Magog battle with Satan. Well, then I guess it was good to know that there was 1/6 of them left. But again, is it a huge deal? Not a huge deal, but I do think it's noteworthy, and I want to point it out because all the other studying that I've done has been in the New King James, and every now and then I go to the King James, but in this case, it was pointed out to me, thankfully, by Barry Stadler, who's part of the Behold Israel group with Amir Sarfati, what the original King James said. So I'm passing it on to you. Okay. So this is a war against Israel, right? Ezekiel's outlined these historical places, and again, a lot of work and research has gone into this by various prophecy folks to tell you the regions, because back then when they talked about a people or a region, it was usually tied to the people, like, oh, the people of Rosh, which are up in the north, and so they sort of named areas associated with the people, or the groups, and we of course don't do that much today. Now, interestingly, I told you would recognize one, which is Persia. Well, Persia is Iran, but for those of us that are old, we've known Iran to be called Persia in the past, so that's not a leap for us, but there are some others that are. Okay, so why does this capture our attention now? Well, there's lots of reasons. Number one, it's very geopolitical. And as I said, it's happening in the news every day. I mean, every day I read something that ties back. So if you go back 15 years ago, you would have said, "What? What? Uh, Israel and Russia? They're good buddies. They're not. I mean, that's not a thing, right?" And then remember, Russia came into Syria and was on the northern border of Israel. And by the way, they didn't altogether leave; they're still around. Years ago, back with the Shah, Iran and Israel were allies. Then, the Islamic Republic took over, and they're not, right? So I'm saying that this is a very fluid and active situation. Let's take some other things that have gone on. Number one, this couldn't have happened 2,000 years ago, or 1,500 years ago, or 1,000 years ago. Why? Well, there's a few reasons. Number one, it wasn't the latter days, if you will, but here's the other big one. It wasn't until 1948 that Israel became a nation again. So Ezekiel said you will be brought back as a nation, right, from being scattered, and then this battle is going to happen. So this thing couldn't have happened before 1948 anyway. So now that Israel's back since 1948, oh, okay. Now, what are some of the other curious things that are significant tells? Well, we see a growing um, uh, we see a growing alliance growing between Russia, Iran, and Turkey. And understand this: Libya and Sudan, they're just puppets of either Russia or Turkey. So don't think they're like some big independent. Oh my goodness, Berber. No, no, no. So the big three, Russia, Iran, and Turkey, they control the other two. So it's not like they're independently, important players. I mean, they'll be part of the horde, but the point is they're very much controlled by, especially Russia and Turkey. So you have a situation where would Russia and Turkey ever been friends and allies? Turkey's part of NATO. Shouldn't Turkey be upset because Russia attacked Ukraine? Everybody else in NATO is. Nope. Well, what about Iran? Well, I don't know. Anybody watching the news right now? What's going on? Few things going on. Number one, Iran is holding out against President Trump. When people go, "Oh, Tony, I think there's going to be a regime change, and the Shah's son's going to come in," and I'm like, could happen, could. I'm not saying it can't. I'm just saying that probably would be temporary, or doesn't really line up with where things are going. Does that mean I'm a great predictor or seer? No, I'm an idiot, right? I'm just telling you, the Bible says it's going to happen. It's unfolding that way. So what else is going on with Turkey? Number one, Turkey's not mad at Russia. In fact, they're great allies. But Turkey's part of NATO. Mm-hmm. Russia is helping Iran right now. Providing them with all kinds of military aid and all these. And Russia doesn't like Israel anymore. Huh. What else? Well, Erdogan, the head of Turkey, pretty much every week is saying that, well, pretty soon we're just going to march into Israel and take over Jerusalem. Really? Yeah, he's really saying that. Like every week. He said it last week. So, you get my point? My point is those three, along with their puppets, Sudan and Libya, are very much in alignment, very much pulled together. And those three nations have never been together. Never have they cooperated, and they frequently will get their three prime ministers together, their three leaders together. These are These are allies: Iran, Turkey, and Russia. That's what it is. Okay? So all of that's happening, but that's just come together in the last, I don't know, 3 years? 3 years? Maybe 2 years? So what ends up happening is when the attack is about ready to take place, the countries surrounding, primarily Saudi Arabia and Europe, say to these principally three, "What are you guys doing?" And they say, "Well, we're going against Israel for bounty, for booty, something of value." So there's people that object to it, but nobody comes in and tries to help intervene. And that's a God thing. Because God doesn't want to say, well, God in the IDF or God in the United States. No, 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 no. Remember God's two objectives. Number one, to get the attention of the Jews, and number two, to show the nations he is the God. There's no other reason for this war. Understand what God's doing. So he doesn't want it to share the byline with anybody. He is absolutely going to handle this on his own. There will be no intervention by another country. God will execute on this, right? So what are the potential things going on? What could little Israel possibly have that warrants this attack? And remember, Iran, they would go attack Israel today if they could. Turkey's already said they're ready to go. So what is it about Russia? Well, remember what God said. I will put a hook, right? I will put an evil idea into Gog's mind and a hook in his jaw and pull him down into this battle. So something's going to happen. Now, do we know what that is? No, the Bible doesn't specifically tell us. Can we take a guess? Well, let me help you out. Two of the largest natural gas holders in the world is Russia and Iran. And Russia in particular sells their natural gas to who? Europe. And remember what Trump's been saying. Again, I'm not preaching Trump. I'm just telling you what's happening in the news. Is he saying, you guys are at war with the Ukraine and Russia thing, but you're buying all your natural gas from Russia. Why? You're just giving your money to feed his army to perpetuate the battle, but then you're sending money to Ukraine. It's stupid. You're paying for the war. That's what Trump's been saying. Then you come along and you get Nord Stream 1 and 2 that end up getting damaged, and different people blame different folks. Who knows? You probably never know the truth. But what that means is Trump, for example, has been working with the Saudis and others to create a natural gas pipeline from this little country that in the last 10 years has discovered huge natural gas reserves. Want to guess? Israel. And they sell it for like a third of the price that Russia does. So if Russia, which is a energy-based economy, understand that, they get all their money and fight all their battles and do all their stuff by the sale of energy. If there's a play, which is underway, to currently block or slow down the purchase of energy from Russia, natural gas, right? Then guess what? And if that then is pipelines that start coming from Israel up to Europe, would that be motivation for Russia to go down and secure those gas fields? The Bible doesn't tell us. However, that is one of the more valuable assets that Israel has in their country, and could be the motivation. Okay, all right. I'm just looking at my notes. Forgive me. Okay. So, there's a few interesting things that we need to sort of wrangle, and then we're going to get into a timing issue. Imagine, if you will, some of the possible Again, I'm taking what God has said is going to happen, and now I'm giving you some possible things that could impact. Okay. What do you suppose is going to happen in the world when Russia, Turkey, Iran, Sudan, and Libya, and a few other CAS players lose 5/6 of their armies, and their low and their homelands are judged and destroyed by God? What do you suppose that's going to do? Well, number one, Islam's going to take a serious punch in the nose, right? They're not going to, hey, Allah, what happened? Were you asleep? Right? There's going to be a serious punch in the nose. But it's going to change the complete political and geopolitical framework. No more Iran out there fussing, right? That's going to impact Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, right? Turkey is going to get the Ottoman Empire will go away, right? And Russia is going to be damaged. In fact, God says that the head of Russia dies in this battle and is buried in Israel. Can you imagine? Okay. So what's that going to do to Russia? So Russia becomes far less of a political player. So what that does is elevate Europe. Guess where the Antichrist is coming from? The old Roman Empire, Europe. Okay? But let's talk about one other little fascinating thing is, why didn't the United States come in to defend? Why didn't they come to the aid of their ally? Well, that leaves us in the prophetic world with one of three, potential answers. Number one, the United States is no more or crippled to a point that, they can't do anything. Um, Number two, um, the rapture, which could be tied to number one, has taken place, and it's just gutted the United States of all kinds of things. They've gone through a collapse of some sort, which could again be just number one phrased differently. Option three is the politics of the United States have changed, and they are no longer allies with Israel. Well, God said in the end that Israel would be isolated, so it's very possible it's one of those three. Could there be a fourth? Oh, sure. But the point is the United States is not involved with this. So something significant has changed. But that's going to change the whole complexion of the world when those countries are removed from their situation. It's also going to have a huge impact on Islam worldwide, because they're not going to be in a spot where they want to go continue attacking Israel, right? Islam is going to have to recognize at some level the God of Israel, or at least not be as flagrant about their desire to destroy them. So we have a situation now. I was reading this morning. There are more and more Jews that are going to the Temple Mount and celebrating different things and blowing shofars and waving flags and all these different things that 5 years ago were unheard of. You just couldn't do that if you were a Jew. So we have a situation where we have the Dome of the Rock there. The whole Temple Mount is enforced by Jordan. So this battle occurs. Do you think that's going to have an impact on the Jews' view of the Temple Mount? Yeah, I think you're going to see a shift there. I think the Jews are going to take it back over, or something, and you're going to see this being a component or a piece, I think, of making it more palatable and more acceptable for the third temple to be built on the Temple Mount. With or without the Dome of the Rock, is really a detail that the Bible doesn't talk about. But we do know from the Bible there'll be a third temple, right? I mean, that's coming. That's one of our things that we're going to cover. Okay. All right. So, um, could it be that this also creates a situation where the world is now ready for peace with Israel, and the man of peace, the Antichrist, surfaces and negotiates a 7-year peace treaty? I think that's a possibility as well. Okay. So again, these are possibles because there's going to be a domino effect, right? Things will take place because of this battle. It will change the structure of the world, I believe. Okay. All right. So the next topic on this that I want to talk about is based upon the handout that I talked about the timing of Gog and Magog. Okay. I've listed it in my outline that you guys have been following as an unknown timeline. The independent, God doesn't really tell us. But God does provide some hints and tips as to where it kind of goes. So let me go through those. Let me help you to frame up a few thoughts, and then let me give you some of the more common beliefs about when it is. Okay, so first thing that I want to say is the Bible clearly says in the latter days, right? It also talks about Israel being regathered. So we know that it's post 1948, so it hasn't happened yet. We know that it's in the latter days, right? We also know there's a phrase that really catches a lot of biblical scholars in a different way, and they have different views on it because the Bible's not, you know, hugely detailed on this issue. But it says that that Russia, Turkey, and Iran will come after Israel when they're sitting in relative peace and unwalled villages. Okay. Well, depends on sort of who you talk to. Different people have views on that. Some will go, well, Israel's in relative peace right now, and I'm like, I don't know that I would say that. They're under constant attack from Hezbollah, Hamas, a lot of things going on. So, the fact of Israel sitting in a place of peace and this happens, I don't know. I don't know that you could say Israel's sitting in a place of peace right now. Could that happen? Well, it could happen overnight, depending on sort of how some things shake out. So there's lots of beliefs about when uh, the Battle of Gog and Magog may take place. Our dear friend Amir Sarfati, he has a thought. I've Don Rhodes has some thought. There's lots of folks that have some thoughts about what this. So let me give you sort of the three popular. One is it's before the rapture and before the tribulation, right? Because the rapture happens before the tribulation. That's one common thought. There are those that particularly subscribe to that because if you remember back a few minutes ago when I was telling you about God said that Israel would burn the weapons for 7 years. Remember me mentioning that? Okay. Well, what we're also going to learn in this class is that 3.5 years into the tribulation, if you remember, the Antichrist sets up an image of himself in the Jewish temple, which is built, declares himself God, and Daniel 12 calls it the abomination of desolation. Jesus referred to it, the apostles referred to it, Daniel's reference. Okay. Well, and at that point, Israel is overrun by the Antichrist. A third of the Jews flee, and they're supernaturally preserved by God. All right? So if you were to just sort of take the math, again, making an assumption here, right? And say that they burn the weapons for 7 years, then, and if they're like decimated or fleed 3.5 years into the tribulation, then wouldn't the Gog Magog war have to happen at least 3.5 years before the start of the tribulation? You know, not trying to be dogmatic, right? Don't know. But that's where people that have that belief tend to gravitate toward that. The second belief is that it's after the rapture, but before the tribulation. Okay? Same math applies. Uh, but remember when we talked about the rapture last week, there's nothing in the Bible that tells us what the time span is between the rapture and the start of the tribulation, which is the signing of the 7 year peace treaty, starts the tribulation, right? There are many that believe that span of time is months or years. Tim LaHaye, who is the pastor, and author of the Left Behind series, he felt that it was at least 3.5 years between the rapture and the tribulation. Here's the thinking on this, and I will tell you, I tend to fall in this category just from a amateur, thinking about it kind of guy. Okay, so hear me out. I don't know. Again, I don't know. That's probably the best statement. But in my heart, my mind, I'm saying, if God is wanting to show that He's God and get the attention of Israel and get the attention of the nations, my little pea brain says I would have the Christians out of the way first so that I can start really revealing myself, like I did in the Old Testament days. Again, I'm not God, but, it seems to be kind of a thing, because if the Christians were here when this happened, I don't know how that would, I don't know what the reaction would be. I would think it'd be different. Well, think of it this way. If all the Christians are still here on earth and Israel is coming under attack, I would think the Christians would just go nuts, and wanting and expecting some sort of a deal. Remember also, one of the possibilities is that the United States is somehow impacted or held back or diminished or something, right? Which many believe to be in the future, not clearly stated in the Bible, but believed to be. So wouldn't it make sense if rapture occurred, United States is trying to figure its whatever out, or totally goes bonkers, or who knows, right? Um, and so they can't come to the aid. That time goes by, then God intervenes. So there's thought to be that the Gog Magog happens, by some believe, I tend to be in this group, that it's after the rapture, but before the start of the tribulation. I tend to believe that it's going to be something that is the impetus for the Antichrist to come in and create the peace treaty, because there are going to be a lot of dead folks, and I think there'll be a real willingness then to sign on with Israel. Let's give peace. Let's not provoke Israel's God, and let's let them have the temple. And I again don't know exactly, but for me it looks like, feels like. Okay, there are some that believe that the Gog Magog battle doesn't happen until after the start of the tribulation, either early in or toward mid part of the tribulation. Um, the argument again, and the article that I gave you is great. It gives you the pros and cons. Um, it fulfills the idea that if Israel was at peace, right? They've signed a peace treaty that they were at peace and unwalled villages. That peace is fulfilled. The 7 years burning the weapons thing, that one doesn't wash. So there's sort of pros and cons to the whole deal, as far as when it might happen. That's why for this study I put it in the independent. We don't really know, but I wanted you to have the benefit, right, of seeing that. Okay. Last point on Gog and Magog, and then we're going to cover Damascus here and wrap up today. But the I get asked this question now and then, is like, well, what does Israel believe, and what do they think? And remember, God said, "I've given a partial blindness to the people of Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles is complete." I I want you to know, though. I mean, I know obviously some Jews, they know what the Ezekiel 38-39 war is. They may not believe in Jesus Christ as the Messiah, right? But they definitely believe the Old Testament, and they know what that means. So now, whether they're fully up on it and alert and especially in their political or governmental echelon, but they know what it is. I mean, I've heard Netanyahu a few times make reference to it, so he's not altogether ignorant to Ezekiel 38 and 39. Okay, so I want you to know that is not lost on them. They won't be surprised. I don't think. I mean, at some level, I'm sure they'll be surprised, but not in a way that's significant. Okay, next topic I want to cover is independent item number 3, which is the sudden destruction of Damascus. Right? Damascus is one of the oldest countries, or sorry, oldest cities in the world. I think if I read right, it was like the third or fourth oldest city in the world. It currently sits in Syria, which is just north of Israel. If you read the headlines in the last couple of days, Hezbollah still firing. Israel continues to move north into Lebanon and moving toward Beirut. Trump called them up and had a conversation of some kind, debate about that, saying, "Look, don't go into Beirut. I don't want you to do that. Whatever." And so, what the Bible tells us is there's going to be a time in which Damascus Damascus will be completely destroyed. And what it says is it will be a ruinous heap, and will cease. Damascus will cease from being a city. Now, the interesting thing is many of the cities in the Middle East over the long history have been destroyed and rebuilt umpteen times. I mean, I forget how many times it is that Jerusalem has been destroyed and rebuilt. It's like 9 times, or don't quote me, but I mean it's quite a few times, and there's just layers, right, of history there. And so for Damascus, which is not a small city, folks, to become a ruinous heap and to cease being a city, never to be occupied again, that's quite the thing. Now, does the Bible tell us when this will happen? No. Has it happened yet? No. In all of it, well, because look, I mean, how do we know that it hasn't happened yet? Well, because people live in Damascus. Hello. And it's never been, it's had its issues, but it's never been completely destroyed. So, Damon Duck, who is a very, very nice author of lots of things on Rapture Ready, which is a great website if you ever get a chance to spend some time there. An incredible resource for news every day, related to Bible prophecy. He wrote a nice article with lots of nice references for you to research if you want about um, Damascus. And it's a nice detailed article, really kind of covers lots of things and why there's different things going about. We don't know um, when it will happen, of course. That's why it's one of my independents. And additionally, we don't know the who destroys it, right? Is this nuclear, never to be a city again? That doesn't sound like you just rolled a few tanks through, right? Um, does it say nuclear? Of course, it doesn't use the word nuclear. We don't know. Um, and it also doesn't say who destroys Damascus, right? Many people tend to leap and go, "Oh my gosh, Israel's going to destroy Damascus." And that's not what it says. I didn't say they wouldn't. I'm just saying that's not what the Bible says, right? So I encourage you to read through this article on Damascus. Um, but curiously, it's again a geopolitical thing, right? I mean, you had Assad, who's there in Syria, tied with Russia, left. Then you've got this guy who there's a bounty on his head, who's a rebel, who's now the quasi whatever president or whatever he is. And, they're all terrorists, right? They're just wearing a suit. And so, is it a leap that is going to be a situation you've seen just recently? I'd say in the last several months, Israel stepping in and defending isolated groups of Syria as well as Lebanon, but in particular Syria, that have been unduly targeted. And so that puts Israel really in a spot of defending certain minority sects of Syria. Syria is constantly under attack by their own leadership right now, as well as Turkey. Turkey has a huge hand in persecuting and killing certain religious sects and certain groups within Syria. Don't let Turkey, deceive you. They are very much in the middle of all kinds of things. They hate the Kurds. They're constantly killing Kurds. So Turkey is no innocent lamb in this issue. And if you ever read any history about the Ottoman Empire, then you'll know how Turkey has their view of the world and how they're there to reshape it. So, with that said, that's our class for today. I appreciate you coming today. What we're going to do next week, is we're going to cover the next section in our outline, which you'll see Jesus's words and the last days. We're going to spend our time next week talking about Jesus's words about the end times. There's some important things that we want to cover, and I want to really focus in on what Jesus said was going to happen during these end times. There's been a lot talked about and a lot discussed, but we're going to spend some time with that. If we have a chance, we'll then roll over into Daniel 12, the end time prophecy from Daniel 12 done over 2,500 years ago. But we'll see how that goes as far as our discussion and outline. We welcome having you guys. If you have any thoughts, questions, or concerns, please let me know. As always, I encourage you to read what the Bible has to say. I've given you lots of this is what the Bible said. Here's some thoughts for some others. Here's my thoughts, and here's some thinking and some possible impacts and things like that. And it's so critically important that you keep separated what's in the Bible, what different people think, including what I think, because I'm just a guy, right? And it's never my intent to lead you wrong or steer you in the wrong direction. But I'm fallible, I'm human, and the Bible is 100% accurate. So I encourage you always double check with the Bible. If I've said something or something slipped, please let me know. I'm always happy to correct my mistakes. Um, it's a professional habit of mine, and I do it lots of times. So let me know if I've done or said something that was inaccurate. All right, we love y'all. Feel free to message us or send us an email. And I encourage you to go to Google Drive that we share on both our Facebook page of Traveling Bible Study as well as on Tandem Bible Study on YouTube. We keep all those accurate and updated. So please feel free to look at those and download them as we prepare for each class. And we'll have some handouts on this next section of Jesus's words. Um, Probably end into the weekend, maybe into the first part of next week. All right, God bless, and we will see you next week. Bye bye.